Delta CX, available for CX and UX consulting, projects, and training. Contact us for a free consultation.
Hey everybody, it's me, Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. Thanks for joining me. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020, and today's podcast is going to be Learning and Instructional Design. I hope I spelled that right. And for those of you who tend to watch and listen with some frequency, I just want to make a quick apology for how I sound and what I look like. If you guys joined in yesterday for office hours, you knew I was struggling with spring allergies. But what you didn't know was right before I went to sleep, I tried a new nasal spray I'd never tried before. And I woke up at 5 a.m. with anaphylaxis and my entire face and mouth and tongue and throat swollen, and ran to the emergency doctor and decided not to take anything for it. So it's just been slowly going down. So I totally had the Beverly Hills lips this morning. I don't want you guys to think I went and got them done. I'm sure they'll look normal next week. But unfortunately, I know I sound a little weird because my throat's all swollen, and I know I look a little puffy. So just know I'll be okay. I hope you guys are doing well on this Wednesday. And don't forget that we are live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. And so if you guys have any thoughts or questions today, throw them into the chat room. And now I'm going to introduce today's guest. And I'm going to be drinking a lot of tea. Tatawan, someone I collided with on LinkedIn, thanks to her reaching out to me. And so I want to start by welcoming first-time guest Tatawan and tell us about you.
Yeah, my name is Tatawan Sütő. I am an instructional designer. My title is lead instructional designer, actually lead learning experience designer and manager, and I work at Wayfair. Did you ask just what I do or just introduce myself, right?
Both. Go for everything. Where have you been? What have
Yeah,
you done?
so,
and what's your educational background? Tell everybody what you, because
Yeah.
this is new. This is new territory for us. We have not talked about learning design yet. We need to learn.
Yeah, so essentially I design learning experiences at Wayfair for the B2C sales team. Pretty much most of the training that a B2C salesperson goes through at Wayfair, I designed probably 90% of it. I had my hand in most of it. Majority of those voiceovers are me.
Cool.
I've spent quite a few years, spent a few years in instructional design. Was with Wayfair, left a little bit, went to AAA. They clawed me back, so here I am again. I do have a background in, I have graduate degrees in instructional design at Portland State, and I'm also working another one at Boise State. My background before this is, I consider instructional design a little bit of a career change. Before that, I spent quite a few years in conference production. So I designed conferences and also training too, but off-the-shelf training across a bunch of different topics. And then I did design a bit too, but I did it the wrong way. And my feeling that I had a strong feeling that there's probably a better way of doing it. And that's what made me go into instructional design, take a step back, go to school for it, learn more about this area, which I loved, because I used to design conferences in these topics, but actually go and now work in the area.
And you were saying to me before we went live that you wanted to talk about how you first found me and how you ended up connecting with me on LinkedIn. So let's introduce everyone to that story.
Yeah. Actually, a funny thing was, I connected with you. The very first post I saw you was actually you were complaining on LinkedIn somewhere about the conferences, saying that a sponsor tried to get you to pay to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that industry. And I was like, yeah, another reason why I left. So I think the whole conference industry is ready for a shakeup anyway, though. And I think they are seeing that now. But that's when I first saw Debbie, and I looked into your content a little bit more. LinkedIn connects so many people all around the world. And then if anyone follows instructional design industry, there's a big, I guess, UXification of instructional design. a lot of instructional design is borrowing some ideas and practices in UX to see how we can apply them into instructional design. I think there's that sexy element of UX that IDs are trying to, say me too somehow. But I think there's some practices out there. But right now, I feel like I'm a consumer in instructional design and consumer of trying to figure out where does UX and ID fit. And hence brought me to Debbie because there's a lot of instructional designers that talk about UX, but they're not actually UX practitioners. And so we're learning, instructional designers, I feel like, are learning about UX from IDs that learned about UX and then telling other IDs about it. So I'm deciding to go to the source and follow other UX people to see how they actually do it and look at that from the source. And I think anyone in any industry, you have to look at the different sources, you have to look at the, evidence and see if, validate what's actually going on instead of just seeing it from this angle or getting information from this group. So,
Yeah,
and that's
and
how I
to
found it. And I dragged her into a couple
and
podcasts.
and it's been beautiful ever since. And so when you say IDs, you're talking about instructional designers.
Yes,
And when
yes,
you
sorry.
talk about some of the UX, some of the instructional designers who are pushing something about UX, we're not going to name names, but I've, ever since I've connected with you, I'm getting more instructional designers in my LinkedIn feed. Some of them have reached out and connected with me because I did a couple of podcasts in your realm. And I have seen a couple of people post, again, not naming names, who acted like, hey, I have a background in instructional design. So I can do UX design, contact me for UX design work. And my thought was, you're not a UX designer and you have no education or experience in what I do. So maybe you can tell us a little bit when you get in education in learning and instructional design, what kinds of things are you learning? If you can kind of give us some general like what are some of the
What kind of
topics
things
or
are we learning
yeah,
in
what
instructional
topics?
design?
Yeah, topics or
Yeah,
tools
so
or
it's kind of so for higher education, if anyone's decided to go and study instructional design, adult learning theory, first of all, it falls across a bunch of different top like names. It can be learning and technology, it can be curriculum development, it can be um, adult learning theory. I actually am in at two schools. One is at Portland State, and my graduate program falls into the School of Education. So imagine, all the educational topics in there. Another program I'm in at Boise State, it falls in the School of Engineering. Um, and so there's already different perspectives on that. I've talked to other people where it falls into School of Social Work or School of Psychology, cognitive psychology too. So I think we're still trying to determine that a little bit as well. But I think in instructional design, like I think some of the core courses are adult learning theory, um, instructional design models, maybe some things about like curriculum design. Yeah, there should be curriculum design, um, learning learning models, that sort of thing. The newer schools, like the school Boise State I'm at in School of Engineering, they're taking a little bit more of a software engineering approach. So they're introducing concepts that are probably a little bit more related to HCI, more systemic, more like just kind of how you approach it. That concept, like they call it HPT, is called um, human performance technology. That was eye opening for me, and that course was not at all in my Portland State course. So I think there's even as well too. So and I think even then the schools are a little bit behind in terms of I'm not seeing some of the things we practice are what I see practitioners actually doing and speaking about. So
yeah, it's always my concern with some of those courses, especially at the high educational level, is sometimes they seem to be behind what's already happening out in the field. So
mhm.
when we think about learning and instructional design, and you're working at Wayfair now, I know that when I think of this, and I could be wrong, and so you get to tell me I'm wrong, and I support you. When I think of this, I either think of Debbie Levitt made some online courses, or I think we all had to take the sexual harassment course at our jobs and prove that we knew not to sexually harass people. Are both of these learning and instructional design, or kind of where is that definition of what is and what isn't ID?
So, instructional design it's kind of like you wouldn't say I wouldn't tell you a product. Like, I came across this website. Is this UX? Like, that's the product. I feel like maybe the process of how you get to that is instructional design. So
Okay.
for you, so, is this sexual, sexual harassment e-learning course? Is this instructional design? No, that's the product of it.
Okay.
So,
I like that. Thank you. I'm learning
but that is a
already.
good point. There's two different things, like e-learning, the sexual harassment one. We have to sometimes, a lot of instructional designers have to come up with compliance courses, and those are just not fun courses to work on. And
They're not
sometimes,
fun to take.
it is there for a legal reason. And my experience, I'm sure with a lot of other instructional designers, is our creativity is limited because these courses really just check the boxes so they don't get sued. And it has to cover this stuff, this language exactly this way. So those are just kind of, that isn't the best example of what instructional designers can do, I think. But the ones that do it well, that's great. But I think if you get into like some of the larger organizations, some other organizations that are very rigid on how they're going to let this type of course, the message, how it comes out. But in terms of designing instruction, I think it's similar to like UX too. Like, hey, I created a website. Is that UX? You would probably ask, like, did you have a process in it?
Yeah.
So
Did
the
you guess?
definition of instructional design is like, it's the systematic development of instructional specifications using learning and instructional theory to ensure the quality of instruction. So really, do you have a process? Did you use a process? Did you use a model? Did you make sure you applied adult learning theory, learning science? Did you actually analyze it? Did you analyze the learning goals, the outcome goals? Did you use, like, were you methodic about it versus a lot of trainings out there is developed on gut feel. Like, I'm just going to start doing it, right? So, and just because you do that process, your level of understanding adult learning theory, learning science, models, even your development skills, if it's really crappy, you might still end up with a crappy product. So
Sure. Just like in my world.
Yeah.
So,
how does that align with, is that kind of similar with UX too?
I like the way you explained it, because you're right. I was thinking that it was the product, but really it's the process. And so it makes me curious, in general in UX, and this is very high level, we would say our process is researching with target customer groups, doing architecture and kind of mapping out how things are going to flow, doing our interaction design and kind of coming up with the screens and the possibilities. And then we take it to testing and try to run it by people and see where it can be improved, and then kind of iterate on that. Is there a similar process for ID, or
Yep.
is it different?
Yeah, I feel like we're just kind of using different language in a way from the higher level. I'm sure if you go into detail, your processes are a little bit different, but it is essentially that we look at, the project before we even start. A good instructional designer should look at what is a problem, what are we trying to solve, analyze it, do deep analysis of it, because we get a lot of requests, or we need a 2-hour course on this. And it turns out, no, you don't. You just need a job aid, or communications message, or something like that, because training is usually the most expensive and time-consuming development. And sometimes, even coming from, we get products that were built by the UX team, and sometimes the design of this product was really bad, no matter how much amount of training will help, right? So
Right.
good analysis is I think required of an instructional designer, and we have to be a gatekeeper of when do we design training. Is a training required? Now I think of learning experience design. If it's not just training, we should have multiple tools in our toolbox. So if it's not training, maybe it's a job aid, maybe it's something bigger in the ecosystem. If training works, if it's a skills gap. If you're asking people to do something and they don't even have a working computer, or they're not even given the time to do that, no amount of training will help. So it's important for the instructional designer to assess this to make sure what they're actually going to create will have an impact. From that level, there's that. Also, depending on different organizations, the instructional designer is also the developer. But some organizations, the instructional designer just designs up to maybe even the storyboard, and they hand it off to the learning developer, and they'll develop it into an e-learning or whatever. So.
Okay. And since we're all new to the phrases in your world, tell us what a job aid is.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, we want to learn these things.
I feel like I should look it up before I say something wrong. But I feel like a job aid, it's essentially a tool or device to help people do the jobs, like at the point of need. Sometimes you don't need a whole training on it.
Could that be a tool
tip? It could be a tip. It could be anything. Like job aids are even just like a Post-it note, right? What if you have a printed sheet of key points and have someone slap it up in their computer, or at the copier, for example. Do we need to train everyone in the office how to use a copier, or could we just have a printed sheet of instructions above the copier?
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
okay.
You only at a time of need. So.
Yeah. Just a reminder, we are live. I see there's 4 people in YouTube and 2 people. Oops, I accidentally turned on the sound. 2 people in LinkedIn. So thanks to everybody for joining us tonight at this weird time for the podcast. Totally my fault. I was talking to Greece, doing a talk there. So when I try to put together my own courses, I probably shouldn't imagine that I'm doing learning design or instructional design. I'm a bit of a hack, right? So to you, let's call it what it is. To you, the professional, and I say, hey, I write my own courses, you go,
well, I don't want to say that. Depending on how you went to do that. I feel like maybe it's, if you apply some of your UX to that, I think there's a little bit more than just, gut feel and just starting to create the material already. I think of it just a little bit like an architect as well. You're not going to just start putting boards together to build it. Do the assessment of what is the purpose of the house, how is it going to look like, blueprint it, go through this process of it and applying your knowledge of how this works. So I don't exactly know what happened for you to get to your end product, but hopefully it was that. And the purpose is, I want to say, plenty of people learn from bad training, from training that didn't even incorporate instructional design. But from the corporate level, we're talking about speed to competency. Like what could take 5 months just through bad training to get to competency with good instructional design, that could probably be shaved down to 3 months or 2 months. I don't know what the situation is, but you save that time too, to get to that level of competency on top of maybe other things too. Maybe they had to unlearn, or maybe there's even levels of they won't get hurt, or, what kind of mistakes are you avoiding? What type of risks are you avoiding? It's kind of that sort of thing too. So at least from the corporate level, it's that speed. It's like that, how trying to make it as efficient as possible too.
So
at least from the organization.
Do you ever get a request to create some sort of training, and you take a look at the request and you say, you're asking me to try to build some sort of training around a product or feature that's either bad or likely to change later. Do you tend to push back against that, or are you typically stuck doing it anyway? What do those situations look like for you?
Yeah, that's all the time. that also, a lot of times, something that was badly designed, a lot of times people ask training to fix bad design. Yes, I think you get to a level where you should push back. However, I feel like there's a little bit of politics playing too, because the goal, I think, of instructional designers to be that trusted internal business partner, right? To be that trusted internal business partner where you build your value, build your credibility by your interactions, by your great products you create for the customer, internal customer, where you can get to the level where you push back. Or you can get to the level where you push back and then they will listen to you. I think if you're a total newbie, it might be a little bit of a career killer. There have been times, usually in the form of compliance training, where we just shut up and we do it and we leave and we deliver terrible training. But I mean, I think you have to kind of look at the bigger picture as well, because the truth is a lot of people feel like they can design training. A lot of people that don't understand how learning works. I feel like a lot of people feel like that they have done training before, or they've maybe trained or taught some before, therefore they can design training. And in organizations, I feel like people want to go into instructional design. So if you push back no, there's someone else willing to take it to do that. So I think there's a little bit of balancing as well. I have seen examples where the instructional designer, the training department kept on pushing back, or now the stakeholders, the business says, we're going to bypass learning. We're going to go do something else, or we're going to build our own too. Huh?
What would something else be?
Something else be, well, they would talk to maybe find a non-instructional designer to design the training that they want. Or, yeah, it's true. Or they might even create their own internal training team of yes people. Oh. So it's easy to say yes, I think, but it's that playing of politics, I think, is important too. And thinking about the larger picture. But pick your battles wisely as well. Like, what is a big risk of that? I mean, obviously, if it's going to be a big project where there's, people could get hurt, or it's a big investment that will impact the reputation of the of your training group, that would be something to push back. But you have to just, you have to just measure, and you have to just consider your risks and the reputation. So, and I do see there's a lot, and that's probably unpopular, because I know a lot of people that post online say push back, push back, push back. And you can, but where are they going to go if they're determined for it? So I think it's more of that educational and becoming that internal business partner.
It sounds like this is an opportunity for us to partner, because we are sometimes in the same bad situation that you just described. But hypothetically, if a company cared about UX, then you could hypothetically come to us and you would be able to say, hey, someone wants us to train this really bad design. Like, why should we create training around a bad design? Why aren't we fixing the design? This seems like an opportunity for us to at least have a conversation and see if maybe we can work together to go to that stakeholder or go to those managers and say, this is not time or money well spent when we could be fixing the thing. Is that your impression?
Yeah,
do you have a different impression?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the reasons why I became so interested in UX too. So in my role, I design training. I do internal training, and we have whole UX teams that designs in enterprise products. So there's a whole product and design group that designs products for the very same people I train. And so we both are aligned. The overarching goal is to make this group of people successful in their job, as efficient and effective in their job as possible, to make the organization as much money as possible. If, we both do well in our jobs, we both have the same goal. So me as instructional designer, I'm looking out in the world and I'm seeing so much BUX, dual UX practices and stuff like that. And I feel like there's a way where instructional design, if you're in an organization where you already have a UX team that supports the very team that you're trying to train to, you should partner with them. I think the idea of trying to be UX is a bit much, considering that, like, for example, there's a lot of talk about instructional designers should create learning personas. I could spend weeks to create learning personas and go out and research, and which, I already do already, but, go do the deep research to create learning personas, or reach out to my UX team that already has personas on the very same people. And then I can use that as a starting point to modify it for my project's purpose, which probably is, that's the same set of personas for the very same training I'm trying to do, like for the same product. So yes, there's definitely room to partner and grow with each other. Now, a few months ago, I actually got to follow my design team on a product that I was going to eventually design training on. But we went to a site. I followed a team of several designers, several UX designers, a researcher, an engineer, some UX design managers, and I got to see how they went out to research and observe learners, the end users. Learning design, we observe people, but it was interesting to see how they essentially did the same role, but how did they coordinate it? How did they reach out to the learners? How did they watch the learners in their work, the questions they asked, what kind of artifacts that they created from there? And in terms of me as an instructional designer, I thought, wow, we are essentially doing the same thing, but our approach is different. And I think there's some ways of learning from that too.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like an opportunity. And when I think back to some of the jobs I've had, I don't even know who the learning or training or instructional design team was. It seems like these
Mm-hmm.
are people we have to meet much earlier in the process, and to even strategize ahead of time. Should there be training
Mm-hmm.
on this? What should the training be? So that seems
Mm-hmm.
like an
What are the
opportunity.
key things?
Go ahead.
What are the key behaviors that the product is even supposed to do? So we're training the right thing, because maybe there's a level of training needed for your project to be a success.
Right. And so it sounds like so many opportunities for us to work with you much
Mm-hmm.
earlier and really to have an ally there, because it sounds like we have, especially those in your industry who are comfortable pushing back, that you would match those in our industry who are doing the same thing, and we would be able to, because don't you feel like you can always see it coming? If you heard about a project earlier or a product earlier and you're watching it go through some of its design or testing, you're like, oh man, I don't want to write training around that. We got to fix that. So I would think, like, we can see it coming, you can see it coming. You would just be another ally to hopefully help us, because sometimes we can't get the time that we need to make these things better. And then it goes to you to put that band-aid on it or fill that gap.
Yep. Yeah. And for some of the products that you're doing, maybe you're trying to create a product for them to do something, I don't know, for some behavior. But maybe that behavior could be just further refined in learning. Maybe that's like the basic mental model needed to do your product. I don't know, like maybe they need to be able to do this one. They need to know this to perform this in the product that you're designing. And you think, oh, they don't know this, so therefore we have to also build for this too. We'll bring the trainers in. Maybe we already have that covered in our training programs that the learners will have had before they even use your product. Like new hire, for example. And so maybe there's a way we can even go back to that and train on that better, or expand on it better, or focus on it better. Then that issue is not really an issue anymore for products. So you can focus in different areas. Like you can focus in building this area better. So yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of to be shared together too. Yeah. And I think also, product people, they should look into the training curriculum. What are people actually expected to have known by the time they come up here to this product?
Just a quick reminder that we're halfway in, and everyone, please subscribe on YouTube, just for fun, because I like to put this across my face. So thank you. So if you guys have any questions, I am monitoring the chat room. I know we still have 4 people in YouTube today. And a couple of people in LinkedIn, in and out. I have to refresh. LinkedIn is so weird. People, please subscribe on YouTube. I sometimes can't even tell how many people are in the room. All right. So trying to think about some other things that we were going to cover. What would you suggest if a UX person? I know a lot of UX people who are like, man, I'm so frustrated with UX. I feel like I want to change. I can't seem to get things done the way I want. Is learning design or instructional design a good move for them, or is it out of the frying pan?
I think the grass on the other side always feels greener. Maybe because I know a lot of instructional designers that want to be UX too, and to hear UX wants to be instructional design. Every situation is different, so I think maybe that needs to be, dove into a little bit more. So what are your reasons for doing instructional design? What is your reason for being interested in instructional design? Is it just because UX is too hard? Well, what if instructional design is too hard for you too? So I think you maybe have to evaluate that a little bit more as well. I think with instructional design, there's a lot of learning research out there. There's a lot of learning science out there. I think a good instructional designer should know and apply to our design. So if that's something of interest with UX as well to do, to be willing to follow the developments and the science and the application of that, I think that's kind of important as well. So I think with me, I find UX interesting. I don't think I'd be interested in doing UX though. Because my role, at least instructional designers, I feel like we're a little bit of everything. We're in a way almost UX and UI too. Just think of like an e-learning. If it were a product with UX, you guys would probably do a lot more research and maybe hand it over to the UI team, whatever. But I feel like instructional to move a lot faster, and we in a way can afford to sometimes cut some of that research, where I feel like UX is super heavy research. You guys go and like test it out, test out these ideas, these hypotheses out a lot. And really, I feel like in instructional design, we don't really do that as much. That testing isn't as deep as we'd like. I mean, honestly, it really isn't as deep as we'd like. I know people that write online might be saying things a little bit different, but from my experience, if you want to move your, like, I feel like by the time UX is done with a product, at least from what I see in teams, learning experience designers, instructional designers have already done 3 products at that time, like 3 e-learnings at that time. So I think it's a little bit faster paced. I have definitely been in situations where like, oh, we have to create an e-learning out by the end of the week. And so it moves faster. And so I'm researching, I'm developing the storyboard, and I'm developing it, I'm researching it Monday, Tuesday, developing that storyboard, and then developing it actually in the authoring tools a few days, and then having it uploaded in the LMS on Friday.
Wow. Okay. Fast turnaround.
So it is a little bit faster for some, but it is fun. I feel like maybe there's less, like, depending on if it's a small group, a small project, or a big project, maybe there's less stakeholders. Sometimes maybe there's more stakeholders, but yeah.
So let me ask you this. You've mentioned a couple of times that there are people who are trying to push for more UX in learning design, or UX principles, or you guys should learn UX or become UX. Are you just being pushed design thinking, or are you being pushed some other aspect of UX work or principles?
There's definitely being a push of design thinking. There's definitely a push of UX principles. I still don't feel a lot of people in my industry know like really understand UX, like have actually seen it. They've definitely maybe are a little bit more book smart about it, and they can speak to it where it sounds like they know what they're doing. But I'm not so sure yet. What I've seen, it just doesn't really, just doesn't really reflect it. I'm sure you've seen it in your industry too, where people talk a big game. They write all these wonderful articles about best practices and stuff, and then you see their actual work, and you're thinking, what? Like, this should be the example. You write so much about this. How come this work looks like that? So I see that also in instructional design as well too, where people are avid writers about, this is what best practices is, this is what the great UX designer should do. And then I see their work and it doesn't reflect that. So I do think instructional design, we're trying to figure out how to be, I feel like we're trying to figure out what more we can do with the industry. And also we are getting pushed a bit more as well too. So, and UX has just had an explosion right now. And so it is kind of seen as sexier. I think some people are interested in doing UX too, because maybe it's a safety, second career. If instructional design doesn't work for us, we'll go to UX because it seems like you guys at least make more money. And we see a lot of people that jump out of boot camps and find jobs that pay way more than several years of an instructional designer. So I think there's different reasons, but also I think there are some people that truly value UX and are trying to use some of that thought process into instructional design. I really haven't seen it though, but just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But I've seen people that have learning experience design in their title, but they don't do any like real thinking about UX too. I think right now there's a sexiness to it where it's popular to say that you know UX and UI too. I mean, I think I know UI because when I create a button, I create a hover state, a down state. Is that UI? Or, you learn about it on Medium articles. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
right.
I mean,
Whatever the Medium article says, just go with that.
But
we have a question in the channel. It is a long and
yeah.
winding question from Mateo, and we might need him to clarify it because it is a long and winding question. So first of all, are you familiar with design systems?
Yes.
Okay, so Mateo says, how much can you rely on enlarged design systems? Do you think that anyone would be able to create and organize something for you where you could benefit from it, like standard patterns? Would that help with illustrations? Would having something like that in place help you spend more time on research?
I have thought about that. Like, imagine this awesome design system for instructional design. I have lobbied that idea out before, and some people there's someone in the instructional design industry that I really respect. He said he created a big one. He created one before, and it's so hard to get people to do it. So it is possible, but I think the adoption ability is probably lower because it's not as common in instructional design. But if you have a good team to do it, in my organization, we do have a design system, at least for like the brand, the look, the feel. It's in a home base, and so I always go back to that to at least like have it align with the brand. I'm not sure if that's what you might mean by design system. In terms of patterns and stuff, yeah, there's learning theory, there's learning models that we should apply. There's like core sets of learning theories I think any good instructional designer should know. So I'm not sure if that goes with patterns as well, but that could be an area worth interesting to explore more.
Yeah, I wonder if it
but
would save you any time or make things more consistent.
Yeah, I think what would save time, honestly, is partnering with the UX team for at least some of my projects. Like when I jump into a call, like the meetings with a UX researcher for them to share what they learned out in the field, what areas that, that they're going to focus on, what are some things that, that are issues that, it's not related to this project, but worth looking into later. I think that's very important. Because instructional designers, I already told you my timeline, it's really short. I can go out and build it, but I don't have the time afforded for that. So whatever artifacts UX has, I feel like instructional designers should know. I think we should have a meeting where I see, okay, UX, what are all the artifacts you create really? Like, what are your artifacts? What are your, I've seen there's been a stories guide or something like that. What do you create? And I think I want to see that and read that and take the pieces that work for me. And
It would
then be a
actually
part
be
of those.
great to jump before that in a sense, and before we go and do the research, connect with someone like you and say, we're about to do this type of research with these types of people. Is there anything you need to learn from these
Yeah,
types of people that we could be asking them so that when you see our report, some of your questions are addressed?
yeah, definitely. And also the impact as well too. If you're going to create a new tool that's going to change the system, or how they do their work, I'm just thinking from learning side. Okay, that means I have to change the new hire training. I have to change these other trainings. I have to change the other products. Or do you have this other big project coming in later? So that's going to impact how we're going to do this project too. I know the trainers train it this way. I know these e-learnings are this way. So to even make your products a success too, we have to look at the ecosystem as well too. So I think that's valuable. I'm just looking for ways to make to be more efficient and effective in how I work, but also make the products like more engaging and effective too. And for me, I don't want to be I don't want to be a UX person. I think it's important to, I guess, know what you guys do, but I would rather take the personas you create than make them.
Right.
But hopefully, taking the personas is, half of the work is already created, and I would modify it for my needs, or maybe it doesn't need to, because I'm one person. My organization has several researchers that are trained in this area. They have the budget to go out and fly out to do all that stuff. So why should I do rework that already exists?
Right, especially if we can partner and learn earlier on what are some of
Mm-hmm.
the things you would want to know from that research. Just a reminder that we
Mm-hmm.
are live right now. If anybody has any other questions, long and winding or short, they're all welcome, and good to see Mateo staying with us through the broadcast. We've got a few people in LinkedIn, and we've got what looks like 5 people in YouTube. So thanks to everybody for giving us some of your day or evening, wherever you might be. I'm so sorry about my throat and stuff. I am struggling a little bit here, but thanks to everybody for their patience with me. Trying to think of some other things I was going to ask you about this whole universe, because I think the most important takeaway for me is to, next time I'm working at a company, to find you. I didn't even know you existed for the most part. Oh, I remember what I wanted to
Yeah.
ask. Sometimes I've seen a calculator online, and the calculator is trying to prove the ROI of improving, say, the product that the end user is going to get. And the calculator shows if training took us X hours before, but we can make the product better, and training would now be fewer hours, look at how much money you're going to save. Have you ever done a calculation like that where, okay, we can make it 2 days of training, but if the product were better and we only needed 1 day of training, holy crap, we're going to save our company so much money in taking people away from their desks for 1 day instead of two. Have you ever done a calculation like that and presented it?
I haven't, but the product team has.
Okay.
So I work with products teams because they're always trying to create products to make the set of workers, salespeople essentially, more efficient and effective, and look at it from the workflow perspective. And so yeah, we do have it. I don't actually do that deep calculation, but they do, and it's I don't really know if it's something that I need to do. I don't really think of that. There's so much more information involved that I think instructional designers don't really have the access to. The thing is, I think UX is having a moment where a lot of people in the organization, I feel like, know UX.
You'd be
They value it,
surprised.
and the UX team can do that. We instructional designer don't know if we quite have that. So UX has the power, I think, to have access to stuff where instructional designers learning development, we might have a little bit more friction to get to that information. But depending on the culture too, if you have a really valued L&D team, that might be a different perspective. If you might have, a UX team of one, that might be different. But overall,
I'm waiting for the chat room to light up with everybody going, what is she talking about? I've never worked at a place that valued me and gave me time and understood me. It still seems uncommon in UX for us to have that value and have that positive perception. Too often we're told, you just sketch pretty screens.
Yeah. And I've been in the meetings too where like you see the product designer like present something and the UX team looks in horror. That definitely wasn't what they sketched out, what they planned out. And then the end engineers aren't happy. And the instructional design team's like, oh my gosh, I can't train this. But yeah, I also had a question I wanted to ask you.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about the concept of learnability.
Okay,
UX.
so my understanding of learnability is the idea that there may be a task or a process that people are faced with, and it may include something that they don't currently know or understand. So is the product or this process easy for them to figure out? When it's not easy for them to figure it out, so is it learnable? If it's not easy for them to figure it out, we typically have two options, and just to put them in large buckets. One option is keep redesigning it until it's a more intuitive product. So whenever you hear people say learnable, I think more intuitive, where I can just look at this and I know how it works. I didn't need to open up a manual. I didn't have to go to the knowledge base. It was easy to learn. The other option, of course, is to kind of go with what the product is so far or where the design is going, and then bring in somebody like you to try to write more training around it, because people think, oh, you know what? This might be confusing to people, or this might be frustrating, or, we designed it differently here than we did over here, so there may be some confusion. So usually the arguments in our world on that end up being, should we take the time to design something better that is more intuitive and easier to learn the first time? Or do we fix it with training? That's usually what we hear from a stakeholder. I don't know if that's what you hear, but we hear, yeah, that is a little bit confusing. It's a little weird. Yeah, it doesn't work the same way as that other thing, but we'll fix it in training. We'll get someone to write some help files. We'll get someone to shoot a cute animated video. We'll fix it in training. So I think my impression, and the chat room can chime in on what your impressions of learnability are, but that's the way I think of it, is did we make this intuitive so that someone who hasn't seen it before can comfortably move through it without needing tooltips and FAQs and videos and lots of hints?
Yeah, I think when that conversation comes up, we should both definitely be in the room together, because I'm going to assume it takes more effort and time dedication to make it intuitive. Maybe. And that might not be the resources that you have. I know instructional design, like when you're designing training, if we had a big budget and a lot of time, we can make an ugly training really awesome. Maybe have like VR and all sorts of craziness, but reality, we don't. So like, what is that appetite, that organizational appetite that we have to balance our budget realistic with the goals and the goals that we want the product to achieve, or the learning behaviors that we want the people to walk away with too. And I think there's a lot of assumption that training is going to fix this part. And even if that were going to be a case, training needs to be in there, because we might realize, okay, we probably can, but we might already have something for that. To not make it be such an issue, maybe we have to look into the prior training that has happened before, and maybe tweak things where they now, when they use that product, they have the mental model, the schema available to make that product easier too. So I think it would be nice to have that, because usually in training, I get like, here's the product, here's maybe the product specs, go
make us
and
something.
train.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, the product teams are like, they need to know all the definitions of each component in there. And we're like, nope. So
Oh yeah,
there's
endless
but there's
tooltips.
definitely that level. Huh?
Endless tooltips.
Yeah. We don't want that. We want to look at the ecosystem too. Where are they going to find the information for this? Are they going to look it in the wiki? Are they going to be reinforced it? I'm looking at the organizational too. Are the managers going to reinforce this as well too? If this is that kind of behavior change, if we have this tool that rolls out, are they going to look into at their partner next door, their partner next to them and see them using the tool, or they're just going to revert back to the old tool or whatever? So what within, the ecosystem in the office that can we impact to? Maybe it's something that we need to engage the engagement teams as well to like bring some marketing and some rah around, adopting this new product or something like that too. Because I don't know, maybe that would be something of interest. And everything I'm talking about really is from that enterprise perspective, internal captured learners, not for outside, like public. So not public people using the product.
And we've got a couple of comments in the chat room.
Okay.
So, Tarina, a good friend, says, I think Tatawan would be surprised at how little we are valued at UX designers. And Stephanie jumped in after that and said, yes, being valued as a UX designer beyond wireframes happens so not often that I'm almost shocked when people tell me how valuable my work was to them. And Mateo said, I agree with Debbie. I just discovered that the instructional designers exist and are doing a very hard job. It sounds like he discovered this in the last year or less. He said, I found out so many things we're working on similarly that I've now put one of my goals to help them and take that team into the loop. Yay,
Yes.
Mateo,
Yeah,
our
that'd be nice.
hero. Il
Yeah,
nostro
because
eroe. Sorry, that was Italian because he's Italian.
yes, that would be awesome. I think there needs to be more partnership between us because I think we both are trying to impact the same group of people. There's definitely artifacts that your team that will be valuable to us, and there's definitely, I'm sure, artifacts that we use that you guys need to know too. You need to, I feel like, see what level of knowledge or things that they've interacted with prior to that too, and have that conversation about learnability as you guys are determining the tools as well too, and also give us a heads up of what we're designing as well too. What products you're designing, especially when we're talking about learning objectives too. When I design training, I'm thinking of the learning objectives. What do they need to walk away with? What do they need to be able to do, their performance objectives? And it'd be nice, work with a team that designed it. How did they intend to use it? Think of like phones as well. My iPhone, I only know a very few features on it. iPhone, my Android, but it, maybe if I were to design training on it, maybe uncover those features from the product team, and how can you blend it into the context of the learner when you're doing the training or something like that. So there might just be some amazing hidden features that the product teams designed that I don't know in learning. And I don't even understand it well enough to create the context for it in the learning events or activities I'm doing to train the people.
And we've got more comments and questions. So Stephanie says, the whole part about wikis resonates with me. I work in an environment where users have a 300-page document to teach them the business process and a lot of tools. They would really benefit from some ID. Scott R., good to see him as always. How's the city of Chicago? He says, I know next to nothing about instructional design. Are there resources you recommend for someone to learn more? And also, any best-in-class examples of really great instructional design case studies? So
Off the top
resources
of
to
my
learn
head, I'll
and
probably
great
have to
examples.
follow with you on that. But there are definitely to learn instructional design, my favorite person that I like to go into looking, there's an author, his name is Thomas Merrill, and he came up with what he calls first principles of instruction. This man, he dedicated his life work into researching different instructional design models and principles and the research and the evidence in it. And he boiled them down to what are the core principles across all the models. And I think you can definitely, if you're going to learn instructional design, you can just Google up and first and see like what is instructional design and that sort of thing. But definitely look into first principles of instruction. That's very important. And I think that's really great. Also, another thing I think with instructional design, before I forget, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a little bit of disconnect in terms of instructional designers thinking we can UXify our stuff. Because I feel like with UX, you guys are trying to remove friction points. Just, maybe to get you guys to buy as quick as possible. Like, don't even think about things. Just like get you to do that.
Efficient task completion.
Yeah. In learning, friction creates learning. Friction creates reflection. Friction, like instructional designers, we are trying to design intentional friction. If you create an e-learning that's so clickable through, you're not learning anything. We're creating intentional roadblocks for them to stop and think and reflect. And even sometimes the best learning, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. Maybe it's pretty ugly. So there's that aspect involved as well too. And I know there's this, you can probably help me with this, but is that called aesthetic effect, where something that looks good creates credibility? But in learning research, it shows that if you use ugly text, ugly font, like even Comic Sans.
Really you said it.
Yeah, but printed in Comic Sans people will remember it more because they'll focus a little bit more on the words, right? Yeah, but you're focusing on them more, so they will slow down to pay attention. But we also have to balance it. Well, then, they learn it, but do they now think it's credible because, it's not really good looking? So we have to balance these two things too as well. So it's not to make it as frictionless. Obviously, we want to make, like the things that don't matter not be friction, but we have to create intended friction points. And so I'm not quite sure how UX would go into that if you take the core principles of UX to make it as easy and smooth. We're not always trying to delight our users too. Maybe we're trying to take them into a place where they learners to maybe it requires some creation of a feeling or anxiousness or something, what we're trying to create to get them to learn. So
really interesting.
Yeah. So in terms of considering that in perspective as well.
Well, I think you've got some new fans today. We are technically pretty much out of time. If you guys have any last comments or questions, we're running out of time, so get them in. But for the people who've joined us live, they seem really excited about this and want to learn more. And so that's a beautiful thing. And of course, I really want to inspire everybody to go find the learning designers and instructional designers at your company and find out how you can be partnering, especially before CX and UX do their research, because it sounds like things we're trying to learn are things you might need to learn, but you might need to learn different things. So we should be kind of building in what you need into the research. And Darren says, woohoo, hi Tatawan. From Darren.
I was just thinking one more thing. We should partner to see how do you do it? How do I do it? We have to go out and observe the learners and research the learners. How does the instructional designer go out to the field and learn about the users? How does the UX team go out into the field and learn about the users?
Right.
Do you guys do it differently, or do we do it the same? Or maybe there's a process we can learn together. Or maybe you guys can do it for us, or we'll do it for you. I don't know exactly what, but there's some bits there that I think we can share.
For sure. More partnerships, for sure. I guess we will wind it up since we're coming up on the top of the hour, which is 10 p.m. here. I'm going to attempt to sleep, even though, again, apologies to people who joined late. I'm all swollen from having an anaphylaxis reaction. I did not have my lips done. They will hopefully look more normal next week. Thank you so much, Tatawan, for all of your time and fantastic ideas and answers. Tell everybody where they can find you, LinkedIn, tweeting, website. Where can people get in touch with you?
I'm just on LinkedIn. So Tatawan, I've had my LinkedIn for a while. So if you just do LinkedIn /Tatawan, I'm there. Yeah. There aren't too many people named Tatawan, so you'll find me easily.
No, I guess not. So it's you. It's like Madonna. So everybody find her on LinkedIn and connect with her, follow her. I know I do, and she's always got great insightful comments on other people's stuff, even if you don't always post a lot yourself. And so everybody check her out and go out and learn a little bit more about LD and ID. Don't pretend you can do it. Come on, UXers. We hate when people do that to us. But go create new partnerships at your jobs and improve everything for everyone. So I'm going to wind this up for now. Thanks again to everybody for joining in and to Tatawan for being our guest. And hopefully we'll see everybody next week. Next week, office hours is Monday, not Tuesday. So hope to see everybody on Monday. Have a great rest of your week. Click. Click.
Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.